Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, you have issues in your relationships, problems at work, need some guidance as to where you're moving forward in the future, give me a call, send me an email, and we can set up a time for a private consultation. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Well, we have an exciting show for you tonight. We are going to be speaking with Robert Bauval about his new book, Secret Chamber Revisited. So let me tell you a little bit about Robert and get him on the air. Egyptian-born Robert Bauval began studying Egyptology in 1983. His first book, The Orion Mystery, was published in 1994, becoming a #1 bestseller translated into more than 25 languages. His research has been featured in documentaries throughout the world. He lives in Spain. His webpage is robertbauval.co.uk. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, the author of The Secret Chamber Revisited, Robert Bauval. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Hi, Rita. Thank you for having me on your show again.
Well, you know, it's always a pleasure. You just bring so much insight and juice as to what's going on over in Egypt that I love. You know, it's like a little gossipy chat session going on. I don't know. So, Robert, the last time we spoke, there was a huge controversy going on with a couple of German guys who got some ochre from above the king's chamber. And I was just wondering if you could give us a little update on what's going on with that.
I certainly can. And as it happens, I was talking to one of them just a few minutes ago. I've become rather friendly with one of these Germans called Dominik Gorlitz, Dr. Dominik Gorlitz. He's got a rather unusual title. He's an experimental archaeologist. He studied, I think, if I'm not mistaken, at the University of Dresden. And what it entails is that he does experiments in archaeological issues, particularly in navigation. A lot of people don't know this about him, but he is the successor and follower of the famous Swedish explorer Thor Heyerdahl. You remember Thor Heyerdahl of the Kon-Tiki?
I do remember Thor. Mm-hmm.
Well, Dominik Gorlitz is working with the son of Thor Heyerdahl, and they are pursuing the theories of Thor Heyerdahl of trying to prove that navigation was undertaken by the ancient Egyptians in particular across the Atlantic, and that many people of ancient cultures navigated the Pacific. Anyway, that's Dominik Gorlitz, and I was on the line with him, and particularly mainly because the matter has gone to a rather curious situation. But let me give you the background to this, so your listeners are more aware of this conundrum.
Okay.
We call it the cartouche affair. Okay. So
Only you would come up with names like that, Robert.
yeah. I've got another one called the Giza Gate, but we'll do that later.
Okay.
Well, the cartouche affair is a rather odd one. First, let's explain what this cartouche thing is. As many of your listeners would know, the Great Pyramid of Giza, that Egyptologists claim to be the work of the fourth dynasty pharaoh called Khufu, Cheops, does not contain any inscriptions, or at least no official inscriptions. That's one of the many mysteries that this monument presents us with. I mean, there is no writings, which is an oddity in itself, because we know that the ancient Egyptians just loved writing. Monuments before the construction of the Great Pyramid and after are full of inscriptions. I mean, all you have to do is visit the temples of Egypt, and they're like giant books in stone, if you like, with inscriptions from bottom to top. So big questions that always been in the mind of researchers is, first of all, why this most important monument does not contain inscriptions. Having said this, there are indeed inscriptions, but not official. They're known as graffiti, and they were discovered in 1837. And the place that they were discovered was the so-called relief chambers above the King's Chamber. Now, the Great Pyramid has three main chambers within its core. One subterranean chamber under the monument, another one known as the Queen's Chamber, which is higher up within the monument itself, and then further up the so-called King's Chamber. Now, the King's Chamber is made of blocks of granite, huge blocks of granite. It is like a giant rectangle in area, and the roof is flat. It's got a flat roof made of granite beams. And these granite beams, there's 9 of them that span, each span about 7 meters to form the ceiling of this chamber. They're gigantic beams. They weigh about 70 tons apiece. And here is the thing, that nobody suspected until 1837 that there might be chambers above that ceiling. In 1837, you'll have to interrupt me, by the way, Rita. You know me, I'm one of those that doesn't stop unless you push the pause button.
I love listening to you talk because it's always so fascinating. So you just go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
and I have to tell you, my listeners, the comments that I get is, and she lets him speak.
Well, frankly, you're the kind of interviewers I really like, because very often it's nice to stay on the same line of thought until you want to change the direction. But anyway, let me carry on.
Okay.
So we are now in 1837, and here comes a rather oddball of a British explorer called Howard Vyse, ex-Colonel Howard Vyse, who apparently was very rich, and somehow persuaded the ruler of Egypt at the time to give him permission to explore the Giza necropolis, and particularly the Great Pyramid. In those days, things were very slack, and Howard Vyse, to make his life easier, used gunpowder to blast his way in those pyramids to try and find chambers. Well, he noticed that there was a small opening above the entrance of the King's Chamber. Now, what leads you to the King's Chamber, by the way, is the so-called Grand Gallery. It's an enormous corridor sloping and leading all the way to the entrance of the King's Chamber. Where the Grand Gallery butts at the entrance of the King's Chamber, at the top of this gallery, it's about 7 meters high, very difficult to see, by the way, unless you have very strong lighting, this small opening. Anyway, he noticed it, and he entered he using a ladder, he managed to enter this opening, and it was a small tunnel leading to a very low chamber above the king's chamber, above those granite beams that I described before. Now, this chamber, oddly enough, had already been explored by another oddball British called Nathaniel Davison. And we know this because he had inscribed his name on one of the stones. Now, what Howard Weiss suspected, and he was quite right to suspect this, that there might be other chambers. And he used gunpowder to blast his way through the ceiling of this so-called Davison chamber, and discovered the 4 chambers above. They're known as the relief chambers. Now, they're not quite chambers, by the way. They're rather low. Some of them you really have to crouch. I've never been there, but I've seen films, and a lot of people told me their experience in them. And their floor, of course, is made, the bottom one is made of the top of those beams that are in the king's chamber, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And the ceiling of each chamber is made of similar beams. So there's now 5 of these chambers. There's the Davison chamber plus 4 that Howard Weiss discovered. He gave them rather odd names, all British names, of course. One is called Wellington's chamber, the other one Nelson's chamber. The topmost is called Campbell's chamber. They're names of various important characters in British history and some of his friends, actually. The 4th chamber is called Lady Arbuthnot, whoever she was, some friend of his.
Okay, interesting. But go ahead.
Unfortunately, they're known by these names now, so it's kind of odd to call it Campbell's chamber. Anyway, the thing is that not only he discovered this chamber, which was quite a stunning discovery, he found out that in the top 4 chambers, not in the lower one, not in Davison chamber, but in the other chambers, there was graffiti. Some Egyptologists call them quarry marks, painted with red ochre paint. And the topmost one chamber, the Campbell's chamber, is the most interesting, because there, in Campbell's chamber, I'll be very precise, on the southeast corner of the chamber. Now, that top chamber, Campbell's chamber, has a peculiarity of having, unlike the ones below, it has a gabled roof. And that gabled roof is made of limestone. It was erroneously thought that the whole idea of these chambers, hence the name relief chambers, was to relieve the weight of the mass above, so that the chamber, the king's chamber, would not be crushed by the weight of the pyramid. But this is now rejected by structural engineers because they don't relieve anything at all. In fact, they cause a problem. The dead weight of these granite beams is 43 of them, each weighing 70 tons. So you can imagine it's about 2,500 tons of dead weight on the walls of the king's chamber. It's actually caused cracks. But having said this,
are there any thoughts on what the chambers were used for then, or what their purpose was?
Whatever their purpose, it isn't a practical one.
Okay.
So it's a magical one. It is a symbolic one. Like everything else in the pyramid, by the way. Like everything else that Egyptians did, by the way, had a very strong symbolic and magical purpose. I mean, since you've asked the question, people often ask me, what are the pyramids for? You know, what function did they have? And the only way you can explain this is that they had a metaphysical function. In other words, that they were supposed to be part of a magical activity that would, in the case of the pyramids, would convert the physical body of the king into a spiritual entity, to travel back to the sky and join the gods among the stars. So the pyramid has a metaphysical function. If we try and give it some sort of practical function, it doesn't work. I know a lot of people have suggested that it was some sort of machine or energy machine or or a water pump or whatever. I do not subscribe to these theories. There is no doubt at all. And the reason that I'm saying this is that it's supported by the so-called pyramid texts that were inscribed in pyramids of the later dynasty, of the 5th dynasty. So although these 4th dynasty pyramids do not have inscriptions, definitely we know from the 5th dynasty and 6th dynasty pyramids that are not very far away, by the way. They're in Saqqara, about 7-8 kilometers from Giza, and these are loaded with text. The hundreds and hundreds of lines of text. Rita, I'm going to just close a site. Hello, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, because somebody's trying to call me. Okay, well, here we are. Is that in the pyramid text make it very, very clear that the whole idea of the pyramid is that it's the hardware of a process, of a ritual, during which a physical body, that of the king, would somehow, assisted by this structure, be converted into a spiritual body, and somehow be transmitted skywards. So that's what these monuments, at least in the minds of the ancient Egyptians, served. I know that very very often I'm asked, well, did it work? My answer is I don't know. They certainly believed it did because they went to a lot of trouble doing them. Anyway, let's get back to our cartouche affair.
Okay.
So, having said that there is this graffiti inside those chambers, the topmost, the Campbell's chamber, contains one very specific graffiti, which is the cartouche of King Khufu. Now, for those listeners who are unfamiliar with what it means, a cartouche is a name given by the French explorers when Napoleon invaded Egypt, which in English means a cartridge. So if you can imagine the shape of a cartridge, it's sort of oval shaped, or a bullet. And a cartouche, a design, if you like, that has an oval shape, and inside that oval is inscribed in hieroglyphic signs the name of the king. And in this case, it's inscribed Khufu. And this, to Egyptologists, was the proof positive. That's it. They found the name of the king inside the Great Pyramid in a completely sealed chamber. And that, in a sense, is the smoking gun, if you like, the holy grail of pyramid exploration, is that it confirms, at least to Egyptologists, that the cartouche of Khufu proves that the pyramid was built by the 4th dynasty king called Khufu. Now, having said this, there's been a lot of doubt shed on the authenticity of this cartouche, primarily by the now deceased author Zakaria Sitchin. Rita?
Yes, sir.
No. Please make some noises because sometimes I think we're cut off.
Well, I just don't want you to hear that banging in the background.
Well, okay. But, no, because I'm in Spain and you're in Texas, and the lines are not so good from here. But anyway, let me go on. And I've just said that the authenticity of this cartouche has been put in doubt. And it was put in doubt more specifically in 1980 or 81, if I remember well, by the author Zakaria Sitchin. Sitchin wrote a book called The Stairway to Heaven. And in this book, he wrote a chapter narrating the story of how Howard Weiss found these chambers, how he discovered the cartouche, and suggested that maybe Howard Weiss forged the inscriptions. In other words, that he wanted to get the glory of having found the proof that the pyramid belonged to King Khufu. Now, without much ado, I am somebody who believes that this cartouche is authentic, and I'll explain later why I believe so. But let's carry on now with the story of the Germans. Okay. So you can see that there has been many people, particularly the Edgar Cayce Foundation and many others who would like to see the pyramid being a much older monument for various reasons. And by the way, I would love it to be an older monument. I mean, I have no problem with that. But, you know, facts are facts. And who would be very keen to prove one way or the other whether this cartouche was authentic or not. Now, here is the problem. Until from 1837 and until the year 2013, to be precise, April 2013, amazingly, with all the pressure that was put on Egyptologists to test this cartouche. Now, let me say this so that there's no confusion. The cartouche, like much of the other graffiti, it isn't just the cartouche. The cartouche is there at that corner of Campbell's chamber on the southeast corner, but there is also a lot of other graffiti, also painted in red ochre. Now, red ochre is a natural material made from a ferrous oxide derivative. It's literally found in nature in its normal state. It looks like red dust, and if you mix it with water, you get this beautiful paint. And because it's an earth natural material, it will last virtually forever. I mean, it's been used, by the way, not just by the ancient Egyptians, and not just inside the Great Pyramid. Graffiti is found in many other places in Egypt, dating from ancient Egypt. You'll find it daubed on temples, on quarry marks. So it's nothing unusual to find these red ochre marks. By the way, I'm going to divert a little bit.
Okay.
Similar red ochre graffiti has been found behind the Gantebrick door. You remember the Gantebrick door at the end of the southern shaft in the Queen's Chamber?
Where they sent that probe up?
That's right. Well, very recently, they've investigated using a fiber optic camera through a hole that National Geographic had pierced in 2002. Just before the revolution of 2011, a British team passed a fiber optic camera and managed to film. And what they filmed on the floor, there's a small space between the Gantebrick door and another door that was found by the National Geographic. There's about 50 centimeters, about a foot and a half of space. And on the floor of this space, they found red ochre graffiti. And if you ask me at the end of this interview what it means, because what this graffiti says is very mysterious. But let's leave it on the side at the moment. So anyway,
all right, I'm going to make a note because now you got me thinking.
Well, that's because I'm a good writer. Huh? So,
yes.
I whet your appetite, as they say. Having said this, you cannot carbon date non-organic material. In other words, there's no point carbon dating this red ochre paint because it won't give any results. However, somebody, I'm not quite sure who, a while ago suggested that perhaps in order to stick the red ochre paint on the walls, they might have mixed it with natural resin. Now, natural resin is organic, and that can be carbon dated. So you can see that there's a possibility of getting results if one can get a sample from this graffiti and test it.
Makes sense to me.
All right. The thing is that our friends, the Egyptologists, being what's the word? Uncurious, did not bother to do this. And many people were writing to the Egyptological community saying, well, listen, why don't you do this? A bit like opening the door. You know, we still don't know what's behind the doors of the Great Pyramid. For some reason, Egyptologists are particularly uninterested. So finally, finally, these two Germans come into the picture. Now, nobody had any idea who they were. In fact, we didn't know until November of last year. Let me explain what happened very briefly. There is a gentleman, one of these Germans is a writer called Stefan Erdmann. Stefan Erdmann, I know now, has written several books about the Great Pyramid and the Giza necropolis. And he's one of those that very much believes that the monument is much older and is the work of a lost civilization. Now, having said this, Stefan Erdmann has visited the pyramid many, many times in the past. He's somebody who has visited the pyramid on several occasions, not just as a tourist, but as a private visitor. Now, I need to explain this because this is the crux of this scandal. Believe it or not, Rita, you can actually obtain a private visit permit to go and visit the pyramid all by yourself for 2 hours anytime, before closing and before opening hours. Rita, are you there?
So I'm just going to assume that you just have to pay a certain amount of money because I'm sure there's money involved.
Oh, yes. Indeed there is. Well, let me tell you this. I mean, it's something that I've always been baffled about. First of all, that you can actually rent out the pyramid. You know, I don't know of any other national monument in the world that you can rent out privately. And
I mean, is it supervised?
Well, yeah, it is. But let me explain how it's done. You want to visit the Great Pyramid, assuming that you decide, well, I would like to visit the Great Pyramid all by myself. All right? All you have to do is get in touch with a registered tour operator in Egypt, and there is hundreds of these. And you say, look, I would like to visit the pyramid on such and such a day. Could you please get a permit? And the tour operator would write a letter on his registered letterhead paper to the antiquity department. And the letter very simply says, we have one American who would like to visit the pyramid. He doesn't even have to give your name, all right? All he says is we have an American visitor who would like to visit the pyramid privately. Would you please give us authorization for such and such a date on such and such an hour? Now the hours, like I said, are before opening. Now the pyramid opens at 8:30, so the permit would allow you 2 hours. So you could have, say, from 6 to 8 or from 4 to 6, or during the night, by the way. They sometimes do it during the night. Or after hours, which would be after 4 o'clock. So it could be from 5 to 7 or 6 to 8. Okay?
Okay.
Right. Now, to cut a long story short, these Germans ask a tour operator to get them a permit. Now, here is what it costs, by the way, in case you want to do it. It cost 5,000 Egyptian pounds to get this permit. Now, 5,000 Egyptian pounds is about $800. All right, which is, in America, it's not such a big deal for a lot of people, right?
Right.
I mean, it's the price of a party. You know, you invite 6 people at a restaurant in New York, and you've got a bill of $800. Easy, right? And by the way, the permit is either for one person or for 30 people. In other words, that it's the same price. You would pay $800 whether you're one person or 30. So you can imagine, if you can round up 10 people or 15 people, the price is almost negligible. You know, for $100, if you're 10 of you, you can visit the pyramid, privately, which is, by the way, often done nearly every day, because of course groups are not very rarely single. You'll find that tour operators will ask for permits. Private visits occur at least once a day. Well, now because tourist is low, as you know, there is a low tourism because of the troubles in Egypt. But in normal times, you would have 2 or 3 private visits a day. So having said this, it's baffling that the permit is a very simple piece of paper without the names of the people who are visiting. It just says, for example, if you had a group of 10 people, it would say, we have 10 Americans visiting the pyramid, would like to visit the pyramid on such a day. And on that letterhead paper, the various departments of the antiquities would write by hand, and they would simply say, okay, you know, in handwriting. And that's it. That constitutes the permit.
I mean, it sounds like it's harder to get through the airport than to get inside the pyramid.
It's harder to rent a car to rent the pyramid. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I mean, you know, when you go and rent a car, you get at least a 3-page contract, you know, giving you the whole conditions and insurance and what you can do and what you can't do, and you know, the waivers and so forth. This is, I mean, it's quite amazing. There's no instruction on this permit. It doesn't say what you can or cannot do. It doesn't say whether you can photograph or not photograph. It's really very, very amazingly basic. Having said this, what happens next is that on the prescribed date, the people who have been listed on the permit, the 10 people, or in this case 3 people, there were 3 Germans, by the way. Let me be very clear. There was Steffen Ehrmann, the writer, who had been many times there. There was Dominik Golitz, Dr. Dominik Golitz, who it was his first time in Egypt, and certainly his first time in the pyramid. And there was a cameraman called Jan Gartrig, and he came to film the whole activity. Now, as strange as it may seem to you as well, they not only had asked for the permit, but knowing that they wanted to take samples from the relief chambers and they also, by the way, took samples from the ceiling of the king's chamber, they asked for a ladder. Because you need a ladder to climb up to the ceiling of the king's chamber. It's 5 meters high, and you need a ladder to climb to the entrance of the tunnel of the relief chamber. So they asked for a ladder, and amazingly, a ladder was supplied to them. Hello, Rita.
Yeah, I'm just listening because it's just amazing that they would do all of this stuff.
Yeah, hold on, because this thing gets stranger and stranger. No, I know the story because I got them to tell me in detail. By the way, it's in the book, in Secret Chamber Revisited. What I'm telling you now, with pictures, by the way, and documents and so forth, it's all in there. I did 2 chapters on this. Anyway, having said this, they present themselves with the tour operator. The tour operator has the permit in his hand. He takes his guests, and they go inside. They go at the foot of the pyramid, and there, before entering, of course, the ministry has provided inspectors to supervise the visit. In this particular case, there was 3 inspectors. 3 inspectors plus the tour operator, that's 4 Egyptians, plus 2 security guards, and plus apparently a trainee inspector. So there were 6 Egyptians.
Well, I guess they didn't do a very good job.
Okay, so yeah, well, yeah, it's obvious. Well, I don't blame. By the way, they're in jail. The 6 Egyptians are in jail. They've been in jail for the last. Oh yeah, they've been in jail for the last 8 months. I've been trying to get them out of jail because let me tell you why. First of all, these poor Egyptians. I mean, I know it sounds a bit strange to American listeners, but these people are very untrained. They're not quite sure what is allowed and what isn't allowed. I mean, this, like I said, this piece of paper doesn't make it clear at all. They have supervised visits before where other tours have been allowed to do all sorts of things in there because you know why? They get the permit, and then the tour operator used to go and see our famous friend Zahi Hawass, and Zahi Hawass would say, yeah, no problem, you can get in the relief chambers, you know, it's no problem. And now whether there was money exchanged in this no problem business, I don't know, but I know of many, many people who went in the relief chambers. It was quite common during those visits. I mean, okay. I know, yeah, I mean, you know, because what happened is the inspectors assumed that if you got a private visit permit, then you would be able to enter places that normally on the normal visits during opening hours, you do not go. And in any case, those places that you're not supposed to go, you can only go with a ladder. So, I mean, even if you wanted to go, you need to have a ladder. Somebody has to supply you a ladder. So anyway, everybody goes inside the pyramid. So we have these 6 Egyptians and these 3 Germans happily going inside the pyramid. They climb all the way to the king's chamber, go inside the king's chamber with the ladder that apparently was waiting for them at the foot of the Grand Gallery. They take the ladder inside, and one of them climbs, the Dominic Golitz climbs the ladder in the king's chamber and takes samples from the ceiling. Now, the reason they wanted to do this is very important, by the way, Rita, because this will prove to be more important than the red ochre, as you will see. The reason they were keen to take samples from there is that they had noticed, like many people had noticed before, by the way, that on the edges of these granite beams were dark patches. Now, it had
of like soot from light.
Well, exactly. Everybody had assumed it was soot, but they had managed to see high resolution photography, and it was clearly encrusted inside with the granite. It is as if something blasted it inside. So they were very keen to see what it was. And you'll probably find pictures of this. Well, there are pictures of this in the book, by the way, but I've put some pictures of these black markings on my Facebook. Now, what is odd is that, as I said, there is 9 beams that form the ceiling, and at the edge where the beam meets the wall, each of these beams on both sides of the beam, as they butt against the wall, there is this black marks. It's as if something was used to lift them, to put them in position and cause these black marks. Don't ask me what they are. I know what they are, but I cannot tell you. And the reason is that I'm not being secretive. The reason is that they've tested these marks, and they have made an agreement with the Egyptian authorities that they will not publish the results without the Egyptian authorities having first the right to publish. Okay, Rita?
Okay.
But I can tell you this, is that whatever, they found something in this black material that will surprise us all. All right? I can go as far as that. It is something that is not supposed to be there. It is something that wasn't yet discovered.
Any idea when they're supposed to publish?
Well, they're waiting because, like I said, I'll be telling you in a minute. There is the court case that is going to be heard in about 10 days' time.
So there's more controversy with what's gone on than their ability to get inside. But keep going. Well,
I'm telling this story because it's important that everybody...
It is important.
It's important that the whole world understands, because you'll see what happened when the story broke out. I mean, it went viral. I mean, but anyway, let me carry on. So here they are. They've taken these samples from... They took about 14 samples. Now, let me be clear about what they mean by samples. They scratched off a few milligrams from 14 places on these beams. To be fair, you can hardly notice. I mean, the accusations later that they damaged and destroyed the pyramid is a lot of nonsense. You know, this is a 6 million ton monument. You'll need a nuclear bomb to sort of do any damage to it. I mean, this is, admittedly, they should not have taken samples, but it's not the damage that people think it is. I was told by the scientist who tested it that if you would sneeze, you would lose them. You know, I mean, it's that small amount.
Okay.
So no, to be fair, I mean, you know, however, after that, they moved the ladder out of the king's chamber and placed it outside the grand gallery, outside the chamber, so they could climb and enter the tunnel and go in the relief chambers. And so they did. 2 of them did, Dominic Golitz and the cameraman. The writer, Erdmann, did not go up there. He was too scared. It's rather a dangerous thing to do, by the way. You have to climb this very rickety ladder for about 7 meters high, you know, and it's all very dark, and you have to sort of try and sneak into this tunnel. It's very, very dangerous. But anyway, in they go. And they had the cameraman filming everything. He was filming as they went along. And they somehow make their way by took them quite a long time, apparently, in the dark and with torches and not knowing where they were, because this was their first time in there. And they finally make their way to Campbell's chamber, the very topmost chamber. And they go to the southwest corner and they take about 2 milligrams of this red ochre graffiti. Now, I'm not going to tell you where they took it yet, because you're going to see where the drama explodes in the most unusual manner. So that's it. They put the samples in little plastic containers. They go out of the pyramid. They say thank you to the inspectors, and they go back to Germany. And nobody knew about this, apart from the inspectors who were with them. And even the inspectors apparently did not know that samples were taken until these guys decide to do a YouTube where they put the filming showing them actually taking the samples. I mean, this they put on the YouTube in November, early November. And as you can imagine, the minute that some Egyptian officials saw this, they went bananas. Are you still there, Rita?
Yeah, and so it's sounding like they did not test the materials that they acquired prior to posting their YouTube video.
No, they did test it.
Okay.
They did test it. Okay. I'll get to the testing results when we finish this story. It's important that it is. You'll see why, because the situation has gone very dramatic. There are people in jail, there are court cases, and you name it. Okay, so they put this YouTube trailer, and somebody called Osama Karar, who's now become a very good friend of mine in Egypt, who has a society to protect ancient monuments, saw this and went to the newspapers and accused these Germans of vandalizing the pyramid and to have taken samples from the cartouche. All right, this was, to be precise, on the 8th of November last year. Mm-hmm. Now, what follows is even more bizarre. I heard very vaguely about this, and I was actually traveling in Italy at the time. I was giving lectures in Italy, and on the 10th of December, about a month later, a friend of mine calls me from Egypt and said, "Listen, have you seen the Egyptian paper Masri al-Yom? It's a very popular newspaper called Masri al-Yom. It means Today Egypt, or Egypt Today." And I said, "No." He said, "Well, you better have a look. I'll send you the digital format. And are you going to believe this? There is Zahi Hawass, with a picture of Zahi Hawass looking very, very angry. And the title says, Zahi Hawass says that a Belgian Jew called Robert Bauval paid the Germans to steal cartouche of King Khufu."
You're the mastermind behind it all.
Oh yeah, I mean, at first I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. The guys were completely mad. It wasn't the first time that he accused me of being a Jew trying to undermine Egyptian culture and all that. I mean, I've been accused of being a Zionist and a Jew and a spy, by him many, many times. But this was a little bit too much. He was accusing me of paying Germans to steal the cartouche. So I thought, wait a minute, did they damage the cartouche? Did they take samples from it? Did they steal the cartouche? Now, to steal the cartouche, you actually have to cut the block. You have to go there with a cutting tool and literally slice it off the wall. So I thought, what the hell is this? So I said, I've got to find these Germans. I mean, I've got to find and see why he thinks that I'm paying them to steal the cartouche. I finally traced one of them through Facebook. And that's how I got to befriend Dominic Gorlitz. He was in New York.
Gotta love Facebook.
It's got its uses. So, I put an open message saying, this is Robert Bauval. I would like to contact Dominic Gorlitz and Erdman. Please get in touch with me. It took about 3 days, and finally, Dominic Gorlitz contacted me from New York. He was now in New York, and he had no idea about all this. He had heard in the newspapers that they were accusing him of vandalizing, but he didn't know that Hawass had said I paid them and all that. So I said, well, listen, who are you for a start? And did you steal the cartouche? And why did you tell Hawass that I paid you? He said, no, we never did. And we not only we didn't steal the cartouche, but we didn't touch it. So I said, hold on. I mean, look, everybody's seen the video. You know, you're taking graffiti from the corner where the cartouche is. He said, yes, it's true, but we didn't take it from the cartouche. So I said, oh, no, come on. I mean, you know, well, it sounded very genuine. So, okay, I said, well, but, you know, you'll have to prove this because the newspapers are full of it, that you took samples from the cartouche. And that's very serious because taking samples from some graffiti, well, okay, it's not very nice, but it's not a big deal. By taking samples from this cartouche, you've touched the Holy Grail. I mean, you've touched the equivalent of God's signature on the pyramid, you know, of Jesus signing his cross. You know, I mean, this is not good.
Not good.
So he said, look, we didn't. You know, so he said, well, let me send you some pictures. So he sent me some photographs, and well, the photographs showed him taking samples, high definition photographs, by the way, of taking samples from somewhere, a graffiti near the cartouche. All this, by the way, is in the book, by the way, all the pictures and all I'm telling you here. And on many interviews that I've done, by the way, on this matter on YouTube, where you can see the images. So anybody wants to check, please Google Cartouche Affair, Robert Bauval, you're going to get a lot of information.
Okay.
But having said this, I contacted the Egyptian authorities, and first I said, listen, but I asked Dominic to write a statement that he didn't know who I didn't know who they were. They knew who I was because of my books, of course, and nothing to do with this. I sent it to the newspapers. I even sent them my birth certificates and my baptism certificates to show them that I was not a Jew, although I don't mind being a Jew. Quite honestly, I don't care if I'm a Jew or a Christian. But in Egypt, as you know, being accused of being a Zionist and a Jew is not very good news. So anyway, I sent them my certificates, and you know, all this was fine. But they kept accusing the Germans of having taken samples from the cartouche. So I said, well, maybe they did. I don't know. They're telling me they didn't. And I've seen the pictures, but maybe they took them and they don't want to tell us. Now, 7 days after the accusation of Hawass, the Ministry of Antiquities finally decides to send inspectors to inside the relief chamber to check all this. Amazingly, they hadn't yet sent anybody to check whether this cartouche was stolen or damaged or whatever. So in they go, and I'll give you the exact date. There is 4 inspectors that went in there on the 17th of December. I managed to, and they photographed, of course, the whole visit. They photographed the area, and lo and behold, the cartouche was still there. The cartouche was there. It was definitely not stolen, and definitely looked very...
Was there any damage?
Well, at first impression, no. Until a few days later, an Egyptologist called Monica Hanna pointed out that there was 4 scratches on the cartouche. Somebody did take samples. So at that point, I phoned Dominic Goritz again. He was now in Germany, and said, listen, you guys have been BSing me, all right? I mean, I trusted you, but now it looks like, yes, you did take... And they kept saying, no, we didn't, honestly, we didn't. So I thought, look, come on. There's 4 scratches on this cartouche. And then at that point, I remember I said, well, okay, let's find photographs of the cartouche before you guys went, and let's see if there are scratches on it, right? I mean, that's the way to go about it.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
And I remembered that my good friend, Dr. Robert Schock of Boston University, had been in the relief chamber several times. In fact, he had been in the relief chamber once in 2003. I know that because I was in Egypt at the time. And he had been again in 2006 to do a documentary where they actually filmed inside the relief chambers. So I called Robert Schock and I said, Robert, I mean, you know, you obviously took pictures. Yeah, I took dozens of pictures, high definition, of course. I said, well, can you send me pictures of your visits? You know, and let's see. And he did. And here is what came out of all this. In 2003, the pictures that he sent me, the cartouche was not scratched. There was no scratches on it. But in the picture of 2006, the scratches, there are 4 of them, by the way, 4 scratches are exactly the same as the inspector had seen now in December of last year. So there was no doubt at all that the Germans were telling the truth. Yes, they took red ochre graffiti samples, but no, they didn't take it from the cartouche. And that is a fact. That is a fact, and that is the truth. So I contact the Egyptian authorities again, and I say, well, look, yeah, they shouldn't have taken samples, that's true, but they didn't take it from the cartouche. Meanwhile, these people in Egypt, you know, who had already blasted the accusation from Hawass, and it had gone completely viral. Are you still there, Rita?
Yes, sir. I'm just listening.
Because the accusation of Hawass caused a gigantic problem, because he was, of course, Minister of Antiquities, and it prompted Interpol to investigate. It prompted UNESCO to investigate.
Interpol to investigate?
Yes.
Holy crap.
Well, I mean, he was saying that a Belgian Jew, me, paid the Germans to steal the cartouche of King Khufu. I mean, that's a very serious crime. You know, it's a Great Pyramid. This is a national heritage monument under UNESCO protection. I mean, yeah, it would involve not just Interpol. It involved the Egyptian security police. It involved the Ministry of Interior in Egypt. It involved the Ministry of Exterior in Germany. It involved Interpol, and everybody was trying to find this stolen cartouche, which was at the end not stolen and not even damaged by these Germans. But by the time we managed to demonstrate this, it had gone viral. It was on the news, it was on CNN, it was on BBC, it had gone all over the place.
Well, you know, they say that even bad press is good press.
Well, bad press for me was good press because, of course, it brought me to the attention of this investigation. Of course, now I was thrown right in the middle of it. I was absolutely convinced that the Germans did not take the cartouche, and this is 200% sure. However, the question is, what should they get punished for taking graffiti, and in the circumstances that they took it? Because after all, they did have a private visit permit. After all, they were supplied with a ladder, and after all, they were supervised by 6 Egyptians. So I'm not quite sure how you can punish these people. You know, they had assumed, wrongly, admittedly, but they had assumed that it was okay. That the inspectors were quite okay with them scratching a bit of this black stuff and taking a few milligrams of graffiti. Now,
yeah,
I'm not
if it was one place, but 17 places, I think would be kind of obvious because the inspectors probably helped them move the ladder around.
No, they had to be helped by the inspectors, there's no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that the ladder was already placed within the pyramid for their use. That's already a big help. And 2 is that apparently while they were moving the ladder in and about, the inspectors were with them, moving the ladder and all this. The only thing that the inspectors did wrong was to supply them with a ladder and to let them go in the relief chambers and to climb this ladder to go up. Apparently, the inspectors were not aware that they were taking samples. Now, this has been confirmed by the Germans. They were chivalrous enough to write affidavits to the Egyptian authorities saying that the Egyptians were not aware of this, of them taking samples. That means that the Egyptians are guilty of not having done their job, if you like, of letting people go in these relief chambers, which, as I was telling you, Rita, it was quite commonplace anyway. I mean, okay, it doesn't absolve them of what they did. 2 wrongs don't do a right. But surely this must be taken in consideration. These poor fellows do not deserve to be 1 year in jail, as they have been. I mean, it's too harsh a sentence for having mismanaged their job, all right? They should have been severely reprimanded by the Ministry of Antiquities. They should have lost salaries. They even should have lost their job, but they shouldn't be in jail. We don't hang people for stealing a loaf of bread these days, all right? I mean, the damage is... Look, you're still there, Rita. I keep asking you.
Yeah, I know. Just keep going. I'll interrupt when I want to.
Yeah. Sorry if I keep doing this because I know my computer in Spain plays up a bit. Okay. let me give you a metaphor because people need to understand this. Now, as every American knows, you can have private or visits, right? You can pay well, I don't know if they charge, but you can have a visit in the White House, right? You can even have there are visiting hours and you can visit. Now, suppose that you went on those visits. You paid your ticket and you went on those visits. And there are inspectors, of course, there and people and security guards. Now, suppose that you want to enter the bedroom of the president. You would, one would assume that the security guards would tell you, no, it's not allowed, right?
Yeah, and it'd be like, going through their panty drawer and everything.
Exactly. So not only you're allowed to enter the place, but they let you go in, and what you do is you take an ashtray, okay? You take an ashtray. Now, what is the punishment? What is the punishment? Well, I'm not so sure, because you're going to say, well, listen, I was there, I went on a private visit, I asked the security guards, can I enter the bedroom of the president? They said it was okay. I entered the bedroom of the president. They saw me take the ashtray, they didn't say anything, I went away, all right? Now, admittedly, you shouldn't have done it, but how do you punish? I mean, it's one of those strange crimes that should not have taken place, but it did take place in these circumstances. Now, of course, you want to punish the security guards of having been so slack and letting you do this.
Exactly.
That's another matter. But as far as you doing it, well, you might have been a kid. You might have been somebody who wasn't too sure. You might have been a foreign tourist. You might have been a Chinese tourist, who wasn't quite sure if it was allowed or not allowed. I don't know. All I'm saying is that crime should not be considered as a criminal court case to put people in jail. I mean, you would find them. You'd say, okay, listen, return me the ashtray that you took from the president. Please make an apology, and we'll fine you, I don't know, $3,000 for being naughty, and that's it. Anyway, I don't want to go into the legal matter. All I'm saying is that what happened in there was happened in very, very odd circumstances. That these Germans had a permit, were provided with a ladder, and that the inspectors, at the very least, turned a blind eye to let them do what they did. You agree, no?
100%.
Right. So that's the story. Now, that was all presented. We knew all this. I mean, the evidence came across. We had the pictures from Robert Schoch. We presented this to the Egyptian Antiquities, and lo and behold, now this is a strange one, Rita. It has been proved without a doubt that this cartouche, the sample taken from the cartouche, these 4 scratches taken from the cartouche, occurred between 2004, I'll be very precise, July 2004 and the 3rd of December 2006. We have this window that somebody took samples from the cartouche in that time frame. It's a fact. Now, unfortunately for Hawass, he was the Director General of the pyramid at that time, which means that he is responsible of whoever went in there and he allowed them to go in there to take samples. Or maybe he didn't know they were taking. To make things worse for him, we have managed to find pictures and TV documentaries where Hawass saw the cartouche before it was damaged. That means before 2004. He's there looking at the cartouche, examining it, and it's very clear that that the cartouche is not damaged. And then we have photographs and videos of Zahi Hawass after it was damaged, but before the Germans went. We have pictures of him being in 2007, 2008, and 2010. And he actually...
with the amount of people that go up there, I think if they did a general call of, tour operators, I think they can investigate it and narrow it down to a very finite window and a handful of people that it could possibly have been.
Well, that's the problem, Rita, is that no tour operator and no one else would come and admit that they've been in there because they weren't supposed to be in there. In other words, that anybody who had a private visit between 2004 and 2006 could have gone in those chambers and could have taken these samples. And we know somebody did. The question is who. Now, the problem of finding who is, yes, we can find out who had private visit permits, but we cannot be sure who went in the relief chambers, because the permit would not say this. Or the only person who would
good
know.
Point.
Yeah, the only people who would know are the inspectors who were on these tours, and they would not come clean. Believe me, we've tried. We went to inspectors and said, listen, you've got to help your friends and tell us who, who did you supervise? But they wouldn't, of course, incriminate themselves. However, we do have pictures of people in the relief chambers. Some foolish tourists who did have private permits, who did go in the relief chambers, who took pictures of themselves in the relief chambers. So they're suspects, of course. But ultimately, who is responsible? Because we know that Zahi Hawass, this is the problem. We know that Zahi Hawass would often give verbal permission to people to go in there. His friends, his students, friendly tour operators. Now, whether he got remuneration for it is another matter, but we know he did it. I know personally that he did it many, many times. In fact, when Robert Schoch went there in 2003 and 2006, they went there with a private visit permit, not an exploration permit, and definitely not a permit to allow them to do filming. But they went in there with a private visit permit, but Schoch tells me that the tour operator asked Hawass for his permission, and Hawass said fine. And in fact, more than this, he met them at the foot of the Great Pyramid with inspectors and instructed the inspectors to take them to the relief chambers. Look, all you have to do is go on YouTube to confirm what I'm telling you. It's all there. I mean, put relief chamber Zahi Hawass, and you're going to find him. Or people, you're going to find even Robert Schoch, who's put it on YouTube. It was common practice.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Yeah, what I'm saying
is just
now,
amazing. But go ahead.
Well, what's amazing is that Zahi Hawass, because he was in charge and because he was omnipotent, because he could do anything he wanted, he was protected by his position, he's protected by the Mubarak family. If he gave verbal permission to anyone, that was it. That was it. Nobody would question it. There was a days where you could go to Zahi and say, listen, I would like to climb the Great Pyramid. And if he liked you, or if you made him happy, if you read between the lines here, then he would say fine. And nobody would bother you, because the inspectors would never contest a direct verbal order from Zahi Hawass. A bit like I suppose a bit like in America, if Obama says to one of his staff, listen, I want you to go there, and he gives him a verbal instruction, he would do it, right? Mm-hmm. This is what would happen with Zahi Hawass. Now, the problem is that it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay because allowing Tom, Dick, and Harry and friends and tour operators and tourists to go happily in these relief chambers, well, all he needed is one person to behave badly and take those samples. And we know somebody did. And the person who holds the responsibility where the buck stops is Zahi Hawass. Now, the ministry knows this. Zahi is no more the Minister of Antiquities. He was fired.
Yeah. So what is he up to? Just a little side question. What is he up to these days? Because he's, it's been very quiet from that camp.
Well, he's ducking because this cartouche affair has brought attention to many other problems. It has brought problems to other things that he would allow on the Giza necropolis that he wasn't, strictly speaking, allowed to allow. If you get my drift.
Okay, let me ask a kind of different question. You said that they took samples and there are 4 scratches. But do you think that they're samples, or do you think there possibly could have been some kind of accident? Because if they took samples, you would think that there would be some kind of results by now coming out.
Yes, absolutely, and of course we've thought of this. I mean, I say we because I'm not the only one investigating. There is Egyptian investigators, there is the security police, there is the courts. I mean, I'm the investigator who makes this public, if you like. I've written all this in the book. I'm talking to you.
You're the Belgian Jew. Come on, we all.
I'm the Belgian. No, I'm the mastermind behind this.
That's right. That's it.
Well, actually, I'm laughing because when was it? In 97, I think. There was a book written called The Stargate Conspiracy, written by 2 British authors, and in this book they had accused me and various others, Hancock and John West, of of masterminding a takeover of the world in collusion with aliens. And we were supposed to be in collaboration.
Okay, that's
Yeah. We're supposed to be in collaboration with the MI5, the CIA, the Mossad police and secret police in Israel to take over the world because aliens were instructing us. And so when I told my son this, he said, "Cool, Dad. I love it." So in many ways, I'm laughing because, well, my son is now 30 years old, but if I told him I had masterminded such a plot, he would love it. Now, okay, getting serious on this. The problem is this, Rita. The problem is that since the 1970s, late 1970s, Zahi Hawass has been, to say the very least.
Hey, Robert, can we take a quick break here? I just looked at the clock and we're running a little behind, so hold on one second. Hold that thought. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're here talking to Robert Bauval about his book, Secret Chamber Revisited, and we'll be back with Robert after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Are you looking for a cure for boredom? Never worry. IRN's new interactive website introduces a number of ways to pass time while you listen to your favorite show. Choose anything from the IRN chat lounge, the game lounge, video lounge, or the mood lounge. These fun, exciting features let you chat in real time with fellow listeners, view live skywatches, play daily posted online games, or pick a show based on topic. The choices are endless. Use your time wisely, keeping it all on IRN.
Who were the gods of antiquity? They've been described as the forces of nature, levels of consciousness, and aspects of our psyche. Stories that depict their incredible weapons, their flying machines, and their amazing adventures are characterized as being the product of our ancestors' fanciful imaginations. But what if the tales of the gods are true? Did the writers, chroniclers, and scribes of our distant past actually document a realistic view of our origin? My latest book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, looks at our most ancient legends. Learn of the torrid romances, elaborate plots, violent scandals, and conspiracies that played out in antiquity. Find out the role the gods played in the life and culture we have today. If you want to find out the truth of who we are and where we come from, order your copy of Man-Made today. For more information, go to www.manmadethechronicles.com. That's www.manmadethechronicles.com.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Move past the crossroads in your life and discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns at soulhealer.com. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationships, naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise can help you. Bring peace, harmony, and health back into your life. Schedule a session today. Visit soulhealer.com right away and live the life you've been dreaming of.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
We only have a couple of seconds before we have to get back to the show, and I want to tell you how you can jumpstart your intuition today. Using my free 50-page introductory guide filled with simple, revolutionary, and proven techniques, you can ignite your intuition and tap into your inner wisdom, all from the comfort of your own home. The Institute of Applied Energetics is the leader in online home study instruction for those interested in becoming a certified medical intuitive, intuitive counselor, or energy medicine practitioner. Now is the time to transform your life and take it to a completely new level. Discover who you are and how you work. Open the door to the world of intuition, health, and healing. You can jumpstart your intuition right away by going to www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and downloading our free guide. Get the opportunity of a lifetime and live the life you deserve. Download your free Jumpstart Your Intuition guide today at www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and begin living a life filled with passion and purpose.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Go deep inside yourself and venture into the realm of the unconscious mind with my Meditating on the Kabbalah guided imagery audio CDs. Discover who you are and what you want in life. Meditating on the Kabbalah can help you to open, clear, and revitalize the energetic pathways of your subtle being. They will support you in your spiritual quest by helping you to access the profound insights and inner guidance you need as you work in alignment with your highest good. Let them help you to release negative thoughts and emotions and clear away any limitations that may be keeping you from experiencing your full potential. Walk down the path to health, healing, understanding, and enlightenment with Meditating on the Kabbalah. Order your copy today at www.soulhealer.com. That's right, that's www.soulhealer.com.
Hello, Inception Radio Network. Would you like your favorite show to be played again live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's live request portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's live request portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, even write a dedication message, and that's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the live request tab under the show menu. Now playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Isn't this so exciting what Robert's talking about? Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. So, Robert, before the break, we were kind of talking about what Zahi was doing and what the state of affairs is with this whole cartouche, or what's the thing that you were calling it? The
Cartouche affair.
The cartouche affair. So,
sounds like a good title for a B-rated movie, huh?
That's right.
Actually, I was going to open up. I think we've covered this cartouche affair. I mean, the problem is this. They've arrested the 6 Egyptians, accusing them of assisting the Germans of stealing the cartouche, which is not true. And these poor guys have been in jail for the last 9 months. And I can tell you, the conditions are horrendous. I was in Egypt campaigning on their behalf with the lawyers, but it's become a political case. And the trouble is this, that they know that if they investigate the real story, it's going to point fingers not only at Zahi Hawass himself, because the damage took place during his tenure, but it will point fingers to a lot of other people who might have been involved with this. So that's the problem. And we have pressurized the Egyptian authorities to investigate, to open a new investigation on this matter, and it's been rejected so far. So somebody is playing behind the scene here, if you see what I mean.
Exactly.
Hello?
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll understand why, because this second part of the story involving Zahi Hawass will elucidate why we suspect very strongly that there is a heavy hand behind all this. As you know, Rita, Zahi has been involved with the Edgar Cayce Foundation since the early 70s, when the Cayce Foundation decided with the son of Edgar Cayce, Julian Cayce, to look to do something about finding this fabled Hall of Records that was predicted by his father in the 1930s. And so they sent a young man, a young American called Mark Lehner, who befriended Zahi Hawass. Now, I don't want to go through all this story again, it's all in the book, but to put it in a nutshell, Zahi Hawass has collaborated with the Cayce Foundation. Now, I'm using the word collaborated very loosely here. I'm not quite sure what was the deals between them, whether there was money exchanges, but whatever was the case, Zahi Hawass has facilitated for them to get permits. The first permit was obtained in 1978, where they did drilling under the Sphinx to locate this Hall of Records. I'm very, very incensed by this. I'm not against looking for a Hall of Records. People think that I'm, although I'm not so sure if there is one. What I'm against is people with no proper scientific and archaeological experience to mess around with these monuments, and let alone drilling in a monument that's 5,000 years old.
The part I think is interesting is that there was a National Geographic or whatever, that they were looking for the Hall of Records, and Robert Schoch was in there, and Zahi seemed like he thought they were all crazy, calling them pyromaniacs or something like that. And it was
you're absolutely right, Lita. And this is the not only the deception, but this is the good cop, bad cop game that's been going on for 30 years. Because there is no doubt at all that whether Zahi believes in it or not is another matter. But okay, here is the problem, that the Cayce Foundation, after their first exploration there, and clearly it was arranged by Zahi Hawass and Mark Lehner at the time for them to drill holes under the Sphinx. After that, in 1979, they arranged, or so they claim, Zahi denies this fervently, but they claim that they arranged for Zahi to obtain a scholarship from the Fulbright Commission in Cairo in order to do a PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. He spent 7 years there, and it was fully paid by American tax money, by the way. And he obtained his PhD, and apparently the Cayce Foundation participated in the costs. After which, in 1987, he returned back to Egypt and became director of the Giza pyramids. And it is then, I presume, that they wanted their pound of flesh from him. They had done him this enormous favor of obtaining a PhD, which he needed desperately, because they actually say so in their in a book. They say that they not only arranged for his PhD studies, but the reason they did so was for him to go back with a PhD and climb the ladder of the antiquity department and become the boss, so that when he would be in charge, he would give them permits. So now let me say this, and I'm saying it because it is very important for Americans to understand this. If you do such a deal with a foreign official, it is considered bribery. There's no ins and outs about it. If you want something in exchange for a favor that you do, whether you pay money or pay the studies or give him presents or pay him a holiday in order to get something in return, this is bribery, according to the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act of the U.S. government, U.S. Department of Justice. Rita, hello?
Yeah, keep going.
So,
yeah,
whatever they did, you know, even if they just arranged for his studies in order to get permits from him, this is bribery. This is considered a corrupt act, because not only, you know, it doesn't take a rocket engineer to realize that you shouldn't do this, you know, to get influence through that kind of deals, but it is getting unfair advantage over others who may have wanted to get permits, you know, and
exactly.
that is not allowed. That's number one. But I'm going to skip all this because, and by the way, all these Zionist attacks that he made against me, you're going to find this very surprising. Very surprising, because, you know, I was always wondering why he keeps on accusing me of this Zionism, you know, that I'm a Zionist and that I'm a Jew and that I want to somehow steal the culture of Egypt and all that. Well, believe it or not, in 1995, two senior members of the Elder Casey Foundation, who had already been involved with the previous explorations, formed a foundation called the Shore Foundation. It was formed by one of them called Dr. Joseph Shore.
Mm-hmm.
He died last year, by the way. And another one called Joseph Jehoda. They're particularly well known to the Casey Foundation. They're life members and they're one of the big funders of the Casey Foundation. Now, Zahi Hawass gave them a 5-year renewable permit to do it. Well, apparently, the official reason was to clean up the necropolis and repair the faults and chasms in the area. Whereas in fact, it was very clear, and there is no doubt about it at all, that they went there to look for the Hall of Records. They went to look for the Hall of Records, and we know this because they did a documentary, which was never shown, but I managed to get copies of it. Yeah, by the way, a lot of people don't know this, but before I became a writer, I was an investigative journalist. That was my job, so I know how to investigate these things. Anyway, having said this, you're going to be very surprised because this gentleman...
Nothing surprises me in this field anymore, Robert.
Well, let me tell you, it gets weirder. You're going to get really weird here. You know what we're going to bring in here, and you're going to get really, I'm sure you're going to get surprised.
Okay.
We're going to have, actually the Zionists involved. They actually got involved. We're going to have Rupert Murdoch, you know, involved. We're going to have a U.S. Department of Justice bribery case being opened last year on exploration at Giza, and we're going to have one of the richest men in America also somehow indirectly involved, which is the Koch brothers. You know them, David Koch and Charles Koch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm serious. They are somehow involved. Hold on a minute. Just hold on a minute.
Okay.
I'm inviting somebody who's desperate to listen, if you don't mind. It's a very close friend of mine. Okay, here we go. Zahi Hawass in 1995 gave this 5-year renewable permit to Dr. Joseph Martin Shore. Dr. Martin Shore was a life member of the Casey Foundation and one of its main funders. Very rich man. He was the CEO of a pharmaceutical company in New York. I met him many times, actually. A very nice man, by the way. But it turns out, and I found this out not long ago, it's all in the book, by the way, that he was a rather staunch Zionist. But more surprisingly, at the time when he got the permit, his wife, Laura Shore, was the director of Hadassah. I don't know if you know who Hadassah is.
Yeah, I know what Hadassah is.
Well, there you are. Now, I'm nothing against Hadassah, nothing against Shore himself, but this is, in Egypt, it's really high treason, I can tell you that. Mm-hmm. In Egypt, it's a bit like somebody in America colluding with the Al-Qaeda, okay? I mean, that's how they see it. And
okay.
I am stunned that Zahi Hawass has done this. Now, Dr. Martin Shore's mission was clearly to not just look for this Hall of Records. There was something else that has bothered me since, and you'll find the story again in the book. I've written a whole chapter on this because, believe it or not, there was some sort of weird connection between finding the Hall of Records and a big stunt that was going to be pulled at the millennium in the year 1999, in December 1999. I don't know if you remember, but the Egyptian authorities had announced that they were going to place a golden capstone on top of the Great Pyramid.
I don't recall that, but go ahead.
Well, in brief, the Egyptian authorities in the mid-90s announced that they were going to make a big party at Giza for the millennium. On the 31st of December at midnight, they were going to place a golden capstone on top of the Great Pyramid to celebrate the millennium, and they were going to invite all these VIPs to attend this party. The idea, oddly enough, does not come from the Egyptians. It comes from a rather weird organization in the States at Yale University. The idea was hatched in 1987. I'm not going to go into much detail because, well, first it's in the book and we don't have time to do this. But in 1987, in an organization at Yale University called the Skull and Bones. Now, you've heard of the Skull and Bones,
right? Mm-hmm.
Well, one of their members, if I'm not mistaken, his name was McNally. You check it in the book. Proposed that they should proposed to form a Millennium Society in America, and the idea was to organize this party at the Great Pyramid on the 31st of December, and the guest of honor was going to be George Bush. So that's the root of this plan.
Okay.
But in parallel to this, are the Casey prophecies. The finding of the Hall of Records isn't just to find the Hall of Records. It was, according to the Casey prophecies, it was to, when the Hall of Records would be found, it would usher in, as from 1998, it was supposed to usher in a new, a second coming, a kind of new age for the Christian epoch. Now, Shore, it seems, took this very, very seriously. The man who got the permits, Joseph Shore. And so what they were doing there is rather bizarre, because I can't understand what a Zionist with his wife being the head of Hadassah would want to go and look for the Hall of Records to prove the Casey prophecies. I mean, it's like a Dan Brown novel. You know, I can't put my finger on this. And,
but I mean, I thought in the Hall of Records were supposed to be information about the origin of humanity and, you know, ancient records that were hidden, you know, for preservation.
Correct. If it does exist, that's what Casey said it would be. But he said something else. And this is where it makes the whole thing rather weird. Casey predicted that the Hall of Records would be found as from 1998. So here we have Shore in 1995 getting these permits. Very, very keen. And indeed, what they were trying to do, by the way, and this is where it gets even more weird, is that they were trying to make a documentary. They were absolutely convinced that they were going to find this Hall of Records. The reason being, as you know, is that, as you pointed out before, in 1993, when John West and Robert Schoch went there, and seismographic tests were done, they had located what looked like a cavity under the pose of the Sphinx.
I remember that.
And on the basis of this, the Shore Foundation now, in 95, believed that there was a tunnel leading to this chamber from behind the Sphinx. And the reason they believed this is that Zahi Hawass had announced that they had found a shaft going deep 30 meters, about 100 feet, behind the Sphinx, and in there was the possibility of a tunnel linking to that chamber. And the idea was that they were going to make and here we go again, they were going to make a TV documentary that was going to be broadcasted in 1998 to match the prediction of Casey, where they would announce that they had found the entrance to the Hall of Records. And I'm telling you this because it's a fact. I've got the films with me, all right? The films have been given to the Egyptian authorities, and other people in the States have them. So there is no doubt at all as to what they wanted to do, and they wanted to do it with Fox television. Fox was going to broadcast this in a big way. In other words, they were going to announce that the prophecy had come true, and that this Hall of Records had been found. And God knows what this would have stirred up in the New Age movement with the placing of the golden capstone, as you can imagine.
Right.
Anyway, the whole thing went pear-shaped because at the time, Graham Hancock and I were writing the book Message of the Sphinx, and we exposed the situation with the Shore Foundation, and the project was cancelled. Now, having said this, here comes the fox again.
You are such a pot-stirring disturber, you know. Keep going.
You don't want to mess around with me. I'm a very, 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 very serious investigator. Okay, well, the story gets weirder and weirder because in 1996 or so, when all this was going on, there's a gentleman called Terry Garcia. Terry Garcia, at the time, was working for the White House. He was the Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Terry Garcia met Zahi Hawass in Egypt. And Terry Garcia was very, very excited about this door that had been found a couple of years before. We're talking now 1996, the door that Gantebrick found. And he was very excited as to what could be done with this door from a commercial point of view. And he had the bright idea, I suppose, to propose to the National Geographic Channel. It gets very, very interesting. He proposed to the National Geographic Society. At the time, the National Geographic Society did not have a TV channel. They were doing their productions from production companies, and they were not doing very well. They were competing with the History Channel, the Discovery Channel. But Terry Garcia proposed the formation of a channel, which eventually was called the National Geographic Channel. Now, many people in America don't know this, but the National Geographic Channel is not majority owned by the National Geographic Society. As a matter of fact, they only own something like 26%. The majority share are owned today and have been owned since 2001 when it was formed by Rupert Murdoch, or to be more precisely, by 21st Century Fox. So you can see you can see how the plot thickens a bit. Because at that time, in 2001, when the National Geographic Society created with Fox as main investor the National Geographic Channel, they created something else at the same time. They created a department called Explorer in Residence. Now, the idea was that they were going to recruit in various countries representatives who were going to act as the representative famous explorers. And there was the Learys in Kenya and various others. And they recruited Zahi Hawass to be the explorer in residence in Egypt. He was now, but by that time, he was the Director General of the Giza necropolis. Now, that in itself is a bit unkosher, because you can't employ somebody who works in government at that level on a private basis. But nonetheless, they did this. What we didn't know, and this was discovered after the revolution of 2011, was that attached to this title of Explorer in Residence was a stipend of $200,000 a year paid to Zahi Hawass for life. Now, what were they getting in exchange? Because
unfettered access?
Well, they got the big one that everybody was trying to get, which was the exclusive rights to the opening of the door live, if you remember, in 2002. And they got this, amazingly, when Zahi Hawass, only a few months after being appointed Explorer in Residence, was appointed the chairman of the Antiquities. He was now the boss. He became the boss. And immediately after he became the boss, he allocated to the National Geographic Channel, now newly formed, this amazing exclusivity which turned them overnight when they showed the program. You remember in 2002, it was September. This was a live broadcast worldwide. It launched them right at the top of the chart. And ever since, they've been the top documentary making organization in the world. They now broadcast in something like 45 countries.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're seen in 75% of the homes in America. You know, this launched them. And this is what is now being investigated by the U.S. Department of Justice. Let me get to that.
Okay.
Now, we didn't know about this stipend. We knew of the deal, and I say we, the investigators, but we didn't know there was a stipend being paid to Hawass. This came out because somebody within the National Geographic Society, a journalist with them, who was very displeased with this very unholy alliance that was going on with Zahi Hawass, did one of these American survey polls, asking whether News Corps, it was called News Corps at the time, Rupert Murdoch's organization, whether it should be investigated for breaking the law in America, pointing the finger to this deal that they were having with Hawass. And the poll came to, I think, 70% in favor of an investigation, which of course pushed the U.S. Department of Justice to open investigation. But even that, we didn't know about this because, as you know, the U.S. Department of Justice does not announce these things. They're not transparent at all about these matters until, of course, they adjudicate. However, the whole story broke out in the most incredible way in October last year. Now, remember, this is when Zahi Hawass was screaming blue murder, accusing me of being the Belgian Jew that was paying the Germans to steal the cartouche, right?
Right.
Now, what happens is this. There's an organization in America, and again, Americans are very uninformed about this, called AGT. AGT is a homeland security company owned by a fellow called Mati Kochavi. Mati Kochavi is an Israeli-born Jew, okay, is clearly, born in Haifa, who is also an American citizen, lives in New York, and founded this company. It's one of the biggest homeland security company in America. Surprisingly, like I said, many people don't know this. It also works for the Gulf states. Now, Mati Kochavi, sometime in October, announced that he was going to launch what is now known as deep web journalism.
Okay.
Deep web journalism, and he was going to launch a news blog. It was announced in the New York Times. It was announced in the Los Angeles Times, and all the big papers announced it because everybody knew that Mati Kochavi had the equipment to do deep web research. In other words, that he was going to change the face of journalism. The idea that the news that you read is from journalists getting information on the surface, but he was going to go deep web, which is all legal apparently. He was going to tell us where Obama was having his cup of tea in the morning, and that sort of stuff.
Important stuff.
Yeah, apparently they can listen legally to every single conversation that goes on. They can listen to, they can enter the websites that you cannot. The deep web is that when you do research on Google or other search engine, you get something like 15% or 20% of what is available. Mm-hmm. He can get 100%. In other words, he can enter. Oh yeah. Anyway, but he was using this for homeland security. He's the man who was also involved in the hunting down of bin Laden, using his. He's a very, very close friend of Bill Clinton, apparently. Anyway, when his blog was launched, at the time, there was many activities going in the States. One of the activities that was at the mind of everybody was the U.S. government shutdown. You remember? Mm-hmm. In October last year? And the reason that the U.S. government had shut down was because the Republicans, using the Tea Party movement, had put such pressure using Fox, 21st Century Fox News, to get a huge reaction against the bill that Obama was proposing, the health bill, if you remember, and the budget. So I was surprised that when this Vocative finally brought its first article from the deep web, here is the title of their first article. U.S. Department of Justice investigates National Geographic on criminal charges of bribery against with ex-Minister of State Zahi Hawass. I nearly fell off my chair.
Of all the things they could do, huh?
Of all the things they can do, they bring this story out. And I thought, well, first of all, wow. I mean, we didn't know that he was being investigated, let alone by this super investigators. I mean, I'm a choir boy compared to these guys, I presume. You know, you don't want to mess around with the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act of America. Mm-hmm. They'll send you the biggest investigators you can imagine. So that's number one. But then I thought, well, why is he doing that? I mean, why is he picked on this story? You know, I mean, and then I thought, wait a minute. This guy is very, very friendly with Bill Clinton. He's very, very friendly. He's a very staunch supporter of the Democrats. So why would you want to bring this story out? And then I thought, wait a minute. Who brought down and closed the U.S. government? Who has closed down the U.S. government? And it was very clearly that the pressure that we put on the U.S. government was the funders of the Tea Party movement. I don't need to explain to you what the Tea Party movement is, no?
No.
Well, you may or may not know, Rita, who are the Tea Party funders, big funders. One of them is Rupert Murdoch. He's actually called the wallet of the Tea Party. And the other one is David Koch. Two people who had been involved with Zahi Hawass, and one of them suspected of bribery, the Fox with the True National Geographic channel. So I thought, oh my God, this Mati Kochavi is using his deep web to point fingers. He doesn't really care about Zahi Hawass, but he's pointing fingers at 21st Century Fox. Because if they go down on a bribery case, it goes all the way to the boss. It goes all the way to Rupert Murdoch. You may know this, I'm sure you do, Rita, that Rupert Murdoch and his organization are being investigated for bribery cases in England. They've been investigated for the last 2 years. You do know that? No? Well, Rupert Murdoch owned several big medias in England, in Britain, one of them being the Times and one of them being the News of the World. And it was exposed through investigators. There's a book that's just been written, by the way, published in America just a few days ago on this matter, where it was shown that they were bribing, or at least they've been accused. The case is still ongoing. They were bribing various police inspectors to get information so they could write their stories about crimes and hanky-panky stories and so forth. All this blew up at a very high level in England. Now, what is interesting about this case is that Rupert Murdoch is a U.S. citizen. And again, lots of Americans are very confused about this because he was born in Australia, but he got naturalized in 1985 and has taken up residence. He lives in New York, I think, in one of the fancy streets. And now, if you commit a bribery case, if you're really a bribery offense outside America, like I was saying at the beginning of this interview, you are still being held accountable in America. In other words, that American law consider a individual or a company who commits bribery outside America as having committed the act in America. In other words, you can't go to Egypt and bribe an official for whatever you want. You can, but you can be arrested in America for this. So this is a very serious situation because now they may have found, because a lot of people are trying to bring down this organization, and certainly this gentleman, Mr. Murdoch, on a bribery case. He's known, and maybe this Hawass thing, Hawass may be the Watergate. That's what I think, because although the story is kind of bizarre, it's easy to prove, or it should be easy to prove. Whereas the other cases are very covered up with all sorts of legal loopholes and whatever. But this one, if they've been foolish enough to pay Hawass $200,000, which we know they did, this is now they admit it, and if it can be demonstrated that in exchange they got privileges to have exclusivity on documentaries, which we know they did, then normally the U.S. Department of Justice and the Foreign Corrupt Act practice should consider this a bribery. But it's all in closed doors. We haven't heard what the outcome of this is. I've been putting a lot of calls out. You know, I'm trying to see if we can get the U.S. Department of Justice to let us know, you know. But until we do, and whether the case is still ongoing, it's been going on since October. Now, of course, I assume, I suppose correctly, that unlike what's going on in the courts in Egypt, the U.S. Department of Justice is not swayed by any big-time lawyers. You know, that they will do their job irrespective of the pressure being put on them by external lawyers, which I'm sure the 21st Century Fox and Rupert Murdoch have, and as they've done, by the way, to this journalist who has exposed the story. If you remember when we were talking about this man who asked for the poll to be conducted, right? They put a lot of pressure on him, and he had to bring down his website. And since then, they shut him up. I know the man. I know. I won't mention his name because I don't want to get him into trouble. Well, there you are. That's the whole story, and it's an ongoing story. And I've exposed as much as I can, with details, with photographs, with documents in the Secret Chamber Revisited. So if you want to know more about this,
get the book, Secret Chamber Revisited. I'm very proud of this book. I'm taking a big, because it's, although I've written, as you know, about ancient Egypt and my theories and the correlation theories with the stars, I pride myself of being a very good investigator. I've done investigations on commercial deals. I've done investigations in the Middle East. I don't want to go in details, but I did a lot of this stuff for private companies and for commercial companies and sometimes for governments. And to me, well, I also believe in justice. I'm one of these people because I firmly and strongly believe, not just believe. I mean, to me, what happened at the Giza necropolis for the last 40 years is a scandal. That proper research have been blocked, that proper exploration, like the Gantibrick exploration, have been blocked, that people like Robert Schoch, who has done very serious investigation and needs to do more to examine the date of this necropolis with the Sphinx, has been blocked. Many people have been blocked, and those who were not supposed to go there have been given licenses by this corrupt person. You know, there's 40 years of time wasted. Can you imagine that the Gantibrick door was discovered in 1993, that in 2002 the National Geographic has found another door in the northern shaft, and we still don't know what's behind them. We still don't know because of this mess and these corruption deals and these backhanders and behind-the-scene activities. So I'm very... But I'm going to, since you brought it back up, you said that there was some graffiti in that space. And so I'm going to bring you back there because we have about 15 minutes left, maybe not quite 15 minutes. So do you know what the graffiti says? Can they read it?
Yes, I do. Let me be very clear on this one. The graffiti is behind the Gantibrick door. The Gantibrick door is the door that was found in 1993 at the end of the southern shaft of the Queen's Chamber. The southern shaft goes deep into the core of the pyramid, 60 meters deep, and then it meets this door, the Gantibrick door. In 2002, the National Geographic Channel drilled the hole when they were given permission by Hawass, and they found another door about 1.5 feet away from the Gantibrick door. So that's it. We don't know what's behind the second door. But in 2011, a group of researchers from Leeds University managed to get a fiber optic camera through the hole that was drilled by the National Geographic and managed to film, and they film graffiti. The graffiti are numbers. There's 3 numbers. He gives the number 1, he gives the number 20, and he gives the number 100. And let me tell you what this means. And before I do, let me tell you what the pyramid design is, and I'll be very, very brief on this. People have been intrigued, mathematicians, researchers, architects. My brother, for example, has been researching the architecture of the pyramid for many, many years. They've been intrigued that this monument is designed using 2 very important scientific principles. One is astronomy, which I'm the man, as you know. The pyramid is designed with astronomical factors, such as it's aligned to the cardinal direction, it has shafts pointing to Orion's belt and Sirius and so forth. And the other is that the mathematics that was used was of a very high standard. And for example, that they used the constant of pi to design the base and the height of the pyramid. Pi was not supposed to have been discovered until the Greeks, many thousand years later. They've used the golden section, but most importantly, they have used prime numbers to form the various slopes and measurements of the internal system. Now, prime numbers is something very bizarre, because prime numbers today, if you receive a series of numbers from a source, if I'm like me now, if you hear 3 noises during our conversation, and one goes 3 times, one goes 7 times, and one goes 11 times. If you hear those 3 sequence numbers, you can be absolutely sure that whoever is making this noise is intelligent and very intelligent.
Okay.
Because, you understand? So in other words, if we receive a message, these 3 numbers, or a series of prime numbers in sequence from outer space, we can be very... Remember the film Contact? Where they're sitting there and they hear these noises, and then somebody says, well, I'm hearing bleep, 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 and then bleep, 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 bleep 7 times. And well, if it's consistent, then you are sure that you're receiving messages or some message from a very intelligent source.
Okay.
So that's what the pyramid is designed with. Now, here we come to the graffiti behind the door. It is 1, 20, and 100. It gives 121. That's 11 times 11. That's 2 identical prime numbers. And we find that the pyramid is designed using the prime number 11 and the prime number 7 consistently. What it means, I don't know, but what it means is that somebody is trying to, well, somebody designed this monument using prime numbers to express himself or themselves, and using astronomy. Today, we would use exactly the same methods in order to leave a message for some unknown future civilization. In other words, that there's no point writing in English or in Turkish or in Chinese. There's no point putting Roman numbers because they may not be understood 1,000 years, 10,000 years from now. But if we put prime numbers and we put astronomical directions, everybody can understand them, whether they're on this planet, whether they're coming from Mars, or whether they're coming from another galaxy. So
were these graffiti in the ochre as well?
Yes.
See, I find that very interesting because it's the only writing inside the pyramid. It's not like, somebody could just randomly go in there and put it in.
No, not only it's the only writing, but it's writing that were completely sealed.
Right, that's what I mean.
Sealed in places where you could not reach until you had a high technology to reach them. And think about that. In other words, a device was built so that whatever you had written there was in a substance that could last, and it did last. I mean, it's lasted thousands of years, and it could not be reached. It was totally sealed, and you could only reach if you could construct a machine that could reach it, like Gutenberg did. Oh, whatever you want to make out of this, but it certainly raises a gigantic question as to what this pyramid means, and that is the research that needs to be allowed, because if it isn't what Egyptologists think it is, if it has a message, and the message is of that caliber, of that intelligence, then in 1,000 years from now, people will say, my God, I mean, how didn't you see it? How didn't you investigate? And we would say we weren't allowed to do so, you know? So this is what I've been advocating for many, many years. This site has raised so many questions, Rita, that it isn't just, I mean, okay, we have this very mysterious code in the pyramid that needs to be deciphered. We need people to go there. We need people to take new measurements. We need people to see what's behind the doors. Maybe looking behind the doors. We need people to investigate whether there is or there isn't a hall of records under the Sphinx. We need to investigate why and how they moved blocks that are impossible to move today. We need to do this. You know, we'd be laughed at by future generations who would say, "Why didn't you do it?" It's blaringly, it's blaringly there. It's a giant question mark in the middle of the desert, begging to be deciphered, and we're not doing it.
With Hawass out of the way, you know, has anything changed in your ability to get access, or have things move forward?
I knew you would ask this question. We're hoping, but at the moment, nothing has really happened.
Is there just too much change going on there right now?
Well, I have to admit that they've got their hands busy with other problems at the moment. I mean, the next big problem is the hurdle of parliamentary elections. That is a very serious matter in Egypt because, as you know, they've had a revolution, they've had a change of 3 governments so far, they've had the Muslim Brotherhood come in and go out. It's a mess. And of course, with this situation going on around in the Middle East with ISIS and Islamic State, and it would be very, very difficult to persuade the Egyptian authorities to grant permits. But I'm hoping that when things calm down, at least the new authorities, the new government, will be more open. What I would not want to see again is this covert and cover-ups. What I want to see is people who genuinely have the ability, the knowledge, the credentials to investigate and be given licenses. You know, I'm talking about people like Robert Schoch and others who can go there and investigate properly with licenses, properly supervised, and decode this place once and for all. Because I tell you, Rita, you know this. I think we discussed this last time. I've lived many, many years in Egypt. I've written 15 books on ancient Egypt. I've spent 3 years living literally opposite the Great Pyramid, from 2005 to 2008. It was there in front of me, outside my office, for 3 years. And I can tell you, this monument should not be there. This monument is a giant question mark that begs investigation. And it's so frustrating, it's so infuriating that with somebody like Zahi Hawass, 40 years of modern investigation have been stopped. Okay, I think we covered it, Rita.
Yeah, well, we're just about out of time anyway. And so I'm assuming if people want your new book, any bookstore, Amazon.com, all those good places?
Yes, of course. You'll find it available on Amazon. It's all in the bookstores in America, Barnes and Nobles and various others, and many other people are selling it as well on different websites. It is a book that basically all you want to know about whether there is a secret chamber at Giza historically and the exploration and all this stuff that we've been discussing. It's very important that people who are interested in this should be well informed, because there's so many misconceptions about what's happening, who's doing what, and what has been done, and why things are not happening. So this book finally makes it all very clear. And like I said, I didn't spare any punches in it.
You never do.
Well, that's the fun of it. I mean, what's the point of being an investigator if you're not going to have fun, huh?
That's right.
Okay,
right,
Rita,
Robert,
listen,
I'm going to let you go, and thank you so much for, spending time with us again. Always love having you on.
It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. I'm glad you're letting me talk because I enjoy putting it. I enjoy the time, actually. It's important you've given time to explain this properly, and you do that.
Good.
Thanks a lot.
Good. You're very welcome. Well, you have a great one, and I will talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. That's Robert Bauval. His book is Secret Chamber Revisited. His webpage, robertbauval.co.uk. And I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser